Welcome back to BROJO Online. I have a very special episode for you guys today. I'll be interviewing Jackson Noble, a.k.a. Jack the Ripper, a certified psychopath. Very rare. He's been diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, and he scores 31 out of 33 on the psychopath scale, which is incredibly high. Now, he could have chosen a path of harm and crime, as some psychopaths do, but Jack is actually a very good example of a high functioning psychopath who's found a way to engage with society meaningfully and helpfully. He's a writer for horror and is planning to become a director in that genre as well. His book isn't even finished yet, and it's already pumping out pre sales. He's got a huge following on social media because he is open, transparent, and honest about his psychopathy, which is incredibly rare and gives us this amazing opportunity to get some insight into what it's like to be high in psychopathic traits. Jax is going to share what it's like to live without self doubt, with full natural confidence, and without caring what other people think of him. It's something completely alien him to be anxious about the opinions of others. And he's going to share with us what we might be able to learn from him and just give us a fascinating insight into his incredibly unique brain. Yeah, just to give you a bit of background before we jump in, I've been following you on, must be TikTok. That's my fucking addiction, for a while now. And I used to work in Department of Corrections, so I used to work with
Oh, okay.
really high risk criminals. So a lot of them were on the
Oh, damn.
spectrum, right up the top. Um,
Wow.
but a lot of them sort of psychopathic, but without self control or with sadism,
Right, yeah.
that kind of thing. So I was really fascinated by psychopathy. I'm quite high in some psychopathic traits myself, but I'm also high in empathy, so I don't get to really, be in the club.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, so I was telling someone, I was like, it's a spectrum. Everyone's on it to an extent.
Absolutely, yeah. I've worked with in the field of psychology for like 20 years now, and I think all the labels and categorizations are just arbitrary. We're all just on spectrums of traits, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I'm really fascinated about your point of view and the life you've led, and particularly what people might be able to learn from you who don't have these traits or maybe could work on developing some of these traits that would be more helpful for them, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it was interesting to me that you thought of that too, because it almost sounds like I guess it would sound odd if you said it to the average person, like just to think outside of the box like that and to realize that having psychopathic traits actually are very beneficial. And just to think of it that way was really cool. That's why I was like, oh yeah, this is awesome. Because that's true, and people wouldn't think of it that way though. Most people wouldn't.
No, I think, and I'm sure you've been berated with this. Most people think serial killers and all that kind of shit when they hear the word psychopath.
Yeah,
But there's a great book by Jim Dutton called The Wisdom of Psychopaths, and he talks about all the high functioning ones, the surgeons and
right.
CEOs and military leaders, and
You're
what
right.
they're capable of that other people aren't, and how actually they're a very necessary part of society. How we kind of will crumble without the people who can't take those kind of risks and that kind of things.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And it's actually more, I would think more that than serial killers.
Hmm. Well, that's the fascinating thing I think about the data around psychopathy is, I mean, some of them are so good at masking and so good at fitting in, and they're not going to willingly
Right.
get tested and all this sort of stuff. So who knows how many there really are because
Right. Yeah.
they're high functioning. And I think this is what's drawn me to you. I recently did a interview with call him self-aware narcissist. So he has narcissistic personality disorder, and like yourself, he's sort of on social media talking openly and transparently about who he is and how he functions and that kind of thing, and kind of revealing the other side of what's that so-called disorder. So anyway, I've got no plan. There's certain things I want to talk to you about. I'm really keen to hear about your perspectives on fatherhood, connection, love, what that means for you, but also things like confidence, risk taking, necessary ruthlessness, all those kinds of traits that might come naturally to you that other people could do with a bit more of, frankly. So I'm not coming at this thinking that there's something wrong with you. Um, I've just learned too much about psychopathy to actually believe that it's a right or wrong thing.
Right,
It's
right,
more like some of the traits are helpful depending on how they're used. Some of them aren't depending on how they're used, and it's kind of like a mastery thing. Yeah.
right. Yeah, that's what's interesting too, because that really for me it comes down to weighing out like the risk and almost is it worth the risk? You know what I mean? Like just because you are willing to take a risk, it's also because that's another thing. People will think that psychopaths are very like impulsive, which we are, but at the same time, I can't speak for all of them, but for myself, I know I feel like I'm smart enough to know where I'm like I don't even want to attempt to, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
To even get to put the risk. It doesn't make sense to even take a risk, even though I don't mind doing it. You know what I mean?
Well, that's one of the fascinating elements that I'm keen to explore is, one of my traits is ruthlessness. And when I was
Right.
working in corrections, it meant that I could make these really high stakes decisions, but I was not no emotional reaction for me. It was just calculation, likelihoods, and I'd just go with
Right.
the numbers kind of thing. Like this was the best move based on the numbers. And it took me a while to realize that other people don't really think like that when it comes to risk taking. They're quite emotional. They don't really calculate.
Right. Yeah.
But let's sort of start at the beginning. Let's not jump all over. I'm going to get way too excited about this conversation because the topic's just like so fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. It is.
And a lot of my audience, confidence building, we often talk about psychopathic traits and especially in the social realm. But let's start with you, man. Let's make this about you. Tell me a bit about, I guess, the story arc from where you come from, how you found out about what's going on with you, and how that ended up with you being on social media and writing books, that kind of basic story arc.
So pretty much I'm from Michigan. Didn't I had a decent upbringing, mom drank a little bit. My real dad wasn't in the picture, but my stepdad was, but he was always gone at work. And so I think because I'm sure they say nurture nature loads the gun, nurture pulls the trigger. So it's kind of a little bit of both.
Sure.
Because a lot of people question whether psychopaths are born or made, and I think it's a little bit of both. And that's kind of the interesting thing. I was just talking about this the other day, actually. My mom had this double side. So she was a very, very good mom. Like no complaint. I get most of my parenting traits from her. But then there was, my dad, my stepdad, I just call him my dad, worked nights, midnights. So from like 5:30, 6 p.m., he was gone, and my mom would drink, and then we could just do whatever the fuck we wanted. You know what I mean? So I think that's where it started to kind of have me almost have this like double, I wouldn't say a double life, but definitely a double, like a split mind. You know what I mean? Like a switch that I could just flick on and off whenever I feel like it. But yeah, that's where I think it really came from was, I can't really speak on if I know something was already wrong, which I think so. Like I never hurt animals or nothing like that, but I would observe one if I seen it, you know what I mean? And not really mind like to pick it up or something that wouldn't bother me. You know what I mean? So that I learned was weird. But I think it was like a double. I was getting raised by the same parent, but two. It was two versions of the same parent. So I think that's a huge part, because that just went on for like 10 years, you know what I mean? After a while, and then you could do whatever you want at nighttime, and then you wake up, and then you'll get scolded for it when, mom is hungover, and you're like, wait, what? I didn't even, you didn't, like, you're not even teaching me to not do what I want from 6 p.m. When the sun goes down, you know, everything can go down. It was literally like the sun. If the sun's up, I have to follow rules. And when the sun's down, and then from there, as a kid, you can easily pick which one you want to do, which is whatever you want as a kid. And again, it makes a lot more sense now that I have children because I'm like, it just helps me realize it. So do you have kids?
Yeah, I got one daughter. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's I figured when you said ruthlessness, I was gonna say a lot. I think a lot of dads just have that more than people think, because it's like kind of necessary. But yeah, I think that's a huge part that kind of, the nurture wise. But I think the first time I really knew something was weird was I got picked on. You remember the movie Holes with Shia LaBeouf?
Vaguely.
They like dug holes. Like there was like kids in boot camp or something. Like they got in trouble and had to dig. Well, I would do that way before that movie came out. I would just anyone who like bullied. Like I wouldn't say I had a list, but I would dig holes. So if I had four bullies in school, I would have four holes that I would dig, and not with never had no plan to like put someone in them or anything like that. It was more of like a therapeutic thing. Like it made me feel like I had an edge on them. Like if it's like if someone bullies me and I go dig a deep ass hole and I just imagine you there, the next time you make fun of me, it kind of made me feel like I know something you don't know, and it just made me kind of feel like I have a leg up. So I think all that was like the first. Someone had mentioned it. My friend Devin, he was like, "Bro, what the fuck?" And I was like, "What do you mean, bro? I'm just digging. Like, what's wrong with that? Like, it's a workout." And he was like, "Nah, dude, that's weird." And I was like, "Huh." And then I realized when I didn't want people to know, that was like the very first time I ever tried to like mask, I think. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah, I just sort of imagine finding out the hard way what other people think the rules are. You kind of, I guess, you had to find out by stepping over the line because you'd have a different. Well, that's one of the things I'm really fascinated by is the development of, I guess, what would be your moral code or your principles, how you guide your behavior in terms of right and wrong. Because I imagine you
Yeah.
develop a different system to what most people do, which most people would be based in kind of guilt and shame, perhaps.
Yeah, I definitely don't feel that for anything. But I don't know. Again, I just feel like in control, I think. So it's like I didn't really learn right from wrong. I just experienced it. You know what I mean? Just being a kid and just basically having a perfect setup to just do whatever I wanted and then get caught and do da da da. You know what I mean? So I
Mm.
think at a certain point, by the time I knew what right and wrong was, I didn't care. And it just took some time, like anything else. You know what I mean? It's like I always say, like it's like riding a bike, but you can still fall off. Like it's a very thin line always, and I'm aware of that as anybody. But I think by the time I learned what right and wrong was, I just didn't really care. You know what I mean? But as I got older, I realized how to master it and make it work in my favor, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things I learned working with psychopathic criminals is I had to find a way to make pro-social behavior in their best interest. So they weren't going to do
Yeah.
it for emotional reasons. They weren't going to do it because they felt bad for people or because they wanted, some sort of outcome for others. But I had to do it like basically my method was I had to make it a real hassle to be a criminal and real easy not to be. And that was generally my kind of rehab approach for people who guilt and remorse were not going to be levers for their behavior. And it was also, I
Right.
mean, this is where I started to have insights about myself because while I do feel some guilt and remorse, it's probably more self-centered. Like I got in trouble, and
Right.
then I'm upset with myself for getting, making my quality of life worse. Though I do have empathy for others, I'm generally pretty strong at justifying my own behavior to myself very quickly.
Right. Yeah, I think most people are too, they just don't admit it.
I do wonder. Well, this is one of the things because like I said, I'm on the spectrum. I'm not all the way there, maybe, but I have felt a bit alien my whole life. I have felt like I'm operating on a different system and having to kind of play a game.
Right.
And I just sort of stopped playing the game as an adult and decided to just be real. Um, that's where I'm really interested, especially as you go into teenage years and so on. What was your view of the kind of system that you saw others living by and how you integrated or worked with that?
Um, I think school it's I kind of noticed pretty early that it was, and again, a lot of people have different views on this, but it just seemed wake up at 7, leave at 3. It just seemed kind of pointless to me, you know. And I'm sure everyone's felt like that, like I'm never going to use this math, you know what I mean? But it was a little deeper than that. I just felt, I don't know, it was just really irritating for me to have to, you know what I mean? And I got expelled from tons of schools for this. And again, I didn't know how to hide it at all. And I don't even think I tried. I just did not like authority. I really didn't. I just didn't. I didn't understand, you know, and not even that, but again, like creativity, like I couldn't even be creative in school. I just basically had to blindly follow people who I thought weren't even necessarily happy. So I just didn't understand that, you know what I mean? And I don't know. I just think I always like rebelled against it, but I think a lot of people do, you know. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know really what I thought about it. I just wasn't. There was nothing like there was never one thought about like college, or I didn't ever care if I graduated, which I still haven't. And I kind of make it a point not to now. Like I don't even want to ever go back and get it. I'd like to just do it without it. Again, it's just full control. It's just like, you know, I don't want anyone to tell me anything, you know? And if I can make the rules work in my favor and do well without it, it just makes me feel better. You know what I mean? Because I feel like I'm gonna lose. I lose if I have to, because I have a skilled trade in welding. Like I could always fall back on that, but I would never use it. I would die before I use that because that would be me having to ask somebody. You know what I mean? It would just take away that dynamic. I just couldn't. It would drive me crazy, honestly.
Well, it sounds sort of like independence and control are like huge principles for you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Like and another thing too, like we were talking about the trial and error thing. When I like my impulses were really bad when I was young and I just did it. You know what I mean? Like this is I won't get all the way into it. It's a huge thing. But when I was I think it was the summer of I can't remember exactly, but I dropped out my freshman year. I know that. And within a year it was just we were doing all type of shit. And basically I got in trouble for this it was the charges were kidnapping. Well, it wasn't kidnapping, it was unlawful imprisonment, carjacking, and armed robbery. So I was like 17, and we put this dude in his trunk, you know, had him meet up this girl to pay for whatever, you know, and then we just threw him in the trunk of his own car and took him to a bank, and then, you know, let him drive away after. And then, so I was in jail for that, and I was 17, and it was 3 capital felonies. I was like, Jesus Christ, you know, I didn't really realize. I think that just like because I was gonna get 5 years, but then they, you know, first time felon. It wasn't carjacking because he drove away in his own car, so they could drop that. Then they dropped the unlawful imprisonment and they dropped the armed down to unarmed. First time felon, unarmed, you get 3 years probation. So, but the fear of having, I wouldn't even say fear really, but like the lack of control, I guess, of having 5 years when I'm 17, which looking back, it wouldn't have been that big of a deal. I get out, I'm 23, 24. It's really not that crazy, you know. You've seen much worse, you know. It's actually pretty fortunate to get it out of the way that early. But I think getting out after that made me kind of like, okay, let me slow it down a little bit because I remember getting arrested and I didn't even know what it was for. I didn't know how many it was for, or I just had no idea. Even when they told me the charges, I was like, this could be anything. Like I don't even know what it was for. And I remember feeling like that and I just felt messy. You know what I mean? So I think after that I started to, and again, being in jail, you know more than anybody, more than me probably, that it's like crime school. That's really what it is for a lot of people. You know what I mean? You just learn how to get better at shit. So, but yeah, I think after that I just slowly was a little smarter with things up until now where I don't have to do anything illegal because it doesn't benefit me to do that, you know? And I almost feel like if I seen this might sound bold, but I'm just being honest. If I seen like another person who was a psychopath and they made, let's say they, I don't know, robbed someone or made embezzled a bunch of money, whatever, made millions of dollars, and then they went to prison, and then I'm out here functioning. I feel like I'm smarter than that person because you couldn't control the outcome enough to be able to still be here controlling the outcome. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
I think that's a big part of it. Like, yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. Pretty much is like, um, I forget what the actual question was, but yeah, it just makes me feel like I think that's what happened though. I just realized that, you know, it's not even worth getting caught because I don't mind like even with the thing I just told you about, I didn't have any remorse for it at all. Not real, you know. I mean, I acted like that in court, but I really didn't have any. And then it didn't come down to that though. It wasn't like, oh, I don't want to get in trouble. It's like I just don't want to be in a position where I have no control. And I think that it was more important for me than to live out and do risky stuff, you know?
Yeah, this is fucking fascinating for me because I worked with so many guys who, when they hit that crossroads, they went the other direction. So they decided, I'm going to be the badass in jail, or I'm going to be the gang leader, or whatever, and they went a different path to gain that sense of control, and spent the rest of their life in and out of prison. Um,
Yeah.
but with a very
Yeah.
similar build up to that point, you just kind of went the other way on that decision, which
Yeah. And
I
that's,
promise you're going to be glad you did for the rest of your life. I mean,
oh, no, I already am. Yeah, for sure. And, but see, that's just like, I get it. Like I do like some people be like, oh, how does someone just because I never got into like gangs or anything like that. I just didn't. I just never got into that. I always like to kind of, you know what I mean? Again, getting in a gang, you're trying to like basically, I don't know how it works, but I'm assuming like anything else, you work your way up. And I like to just walk right in. You know what I mean? That's like right now, like I'm writing this book, but I'm really trying to be a director, but I'm not going to school for it because I feel superior to that. So I'm just going to find a way to do it to where it falls in my lap, and then it'll probably work, honestly. But um yeah, I just think, yeah, but I do understand when I see that, like when I see people like being gang leaders in prison, and like it actually does make a lot of sense to me, like because it's like part of me does get it, you know what I mean? I'm like, all right, well, you have control in there, a lot of it, maybe even over some of the guards, I'm sure, usually,
mhm.
but when you break it down, part of me thinks that that's a amateur level of psychopathy to not control what, you know what I mean? Like I always use the example, like I don't go in public a lot because if a guy walks, if I'm with my girlfriend and a guy says, "What's up, bitch?" and then I fight him, you're my master. Like you're not going to control me. Like even if, you know what I mean? Physical contact is different, but like we all, I'm sure you've been around more of them than most people, those hotheads where you could be like, "Hey, watch this. I can control where this guy sleeps tonight." Hey, bitch. And then he reacts and goes to jail. It's like someone can just be like, "Watch this. I'm going to tell you where he's going to sleep in jail tonight because I'm going to make him hit me." I just cannot stand to have let someone have that level of like pull over me, which makes me think that people like that are even get to the point where they're in prison for a long time or whatever. It's like it just seems like this might sound bold, but it just seems like an amateur level of psychopathy. I feel like the real form of it is like you were saying, CEO or like, you know what I mean, or just controlling your narrative however you want. If I want to go to prison, I can. If I don't want to, I don't have to. It's just full control. So I think ending up in a position where you don't have it is just kind of like I don't know, just kind of confuses me.
Again, this is really interesting. Like, I mean, my once I started studying psychopathy, I realized the ones I'm seeing in prison, the main trait factor is self-control issues, impulsivity,
Right.
short-term thinking, and that's kind of like a make or break. Like the difference between a CEO and a drug dealer can often just be around
Yeah.
control. The CEO just simply goes, "That's a better way to get what I want." And
Exactly.
this is why I find it really interesting because in my work, I often talk about the concept of core values and integrity and how decision making, most people, they make decisions where they think they're trying to achieve a goal, but their decision making actually sabotages it. So most people are kind of engaging in this ongoing pattern of self harm. They're doing short term
Yeah.
thinking and they're ending up in the worst possible position. And this, I'm not talking about criminals at all. I'm just talking everyday people.
No, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, for sure.
You seem to have the ability to calculate the longer shot and see the better path. Even this idea of you not going to school and doing things on your own, that's really long term thinking, actually,
See,
because
that's interesting that you say that because a lot of people think the opposite. But like I was just saying this to someone else. They were like, "Oh, well, my dad just wants me to have work experience." And I was like, what's kind of interesting is having no work experience is experience because you're going to figure out how to figure it out. You know what I mean? And no one can take that from you.
well, that's what I'd say is like what you're doing is the developmental steps to become completely self sufficient, resilient,
Exactly.
resourceful, and you can't learn that following the rules. You have to learn that with trial and error. So it looked like
Mhm.
the short term slow path, but long term it's the faster way. And
Yeah, it is. And especially, you can teach your kids that, like, I don't know, like I wouldn't want my kids to go to a college or anything like that. I would. tell them, just bet on yourself. Really, that's what it is.
Well, this is the thing. See, for you, betting on yourself is the most natural thing in the world. But for most people, it's they might pretend that they're doing it, but for most people, they can't do it. They see themselves as someone they don't trust, someone who they can't bet on, someone who they discourage actively. And I know enough about psychopathy that the idea of kind of discouraging yourself, being hard on yourself is probably quite a foreign concept to you. I imagine the voice in your head's fairly encouraging.
Yeah, actually, yeah, it is. Actually, it's fully. I couldn't. Yeah, fully. That's interesting that you say that. I've never heard no one say that. Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, I just don't have any doubt at all. And I think that's a big thing. Like, not to take it off in this direction, but when people talk about like manifesting and the law of attraction and shit like that, it's almost like a superpower if you can't doubt yourself. Like I just don't think it's far-fetched at all that my first book is a bestseller. I just don't think that. And I think, and again, it's like most people say, or like you hear it all the time, whether you think you can or can't, you're right. You know what I mean? And so I was like, even in December, like when I was trying to like, I guess I wouldn't say manifest, but I was basically I just do it naturally because I don't have any, if we're going off in terms of energy, then it's like if all you're giving out is, I mean, it's actually positive energy, it's self-belief. And if there's none of the other one, it's just gonna work. It's gonna eventually work. And so I was saying this in December. I was like, I'm going to be a writer. And then I just instantly, I wrote one chapter. I was like, I'm the next Stephen King. And I was saying that boldly. I have it on video. I was saying that. I was like, record me because this will be used in a documentary. It'll be doper to have the scenes from before. Trust me. Versus like, oh, he already got it. Like, I want the behind the scenes stuff. And they were like, what the fuck are you talking about? I was like, just, you know what I mean? And I didn't even mind it at all that people didn't believe it. But they're like, how are you gonna, I'm watching YouTube videos on all these first time authors on how they can, oh, it takes, a year to get your first $1,000 and all this. And I was like, I just did. And again, that's what I'm getting to is, oh, that's where it came from. It was that like, I know for a fact that it's not hard. It's just basically persuasion. And a lot of people are like, oh, you're really good at marketing. But it's kind of like Trump, for an example. Like he's not a marketer; he's persuading. What does Trump sell? You don't even know. He persuades, and part of marketing is persuasion. So you know what I mean? Like you could say the marketing's good, but it's really just persuading people to buy it, and that's what like literally my book already in pre-orders. I haven't even finished writing it, and I've never wrote a book, so no one even knows if I can write good. That's the funny thing, and I've already made like $40,000 off of it. So it's like, you know what I mean? But again, that's what I'm getting to is it comes from just like I do not doubt that I could do it. So I'm just going to do it and it's going to work because I said it's going to work. And it just works. And it's kind of interesting that people like, you know, I don't understand doubting yourself. I couldn't even wrap my head around doing that, you know?
That's I think that's got to be the thing that people would be most envious of because
Yeah.
self-doubt is probably the cause of the most suffering that people have in their lives. And it's interesting. I saw a stat the other day, and this is scientific research that there are more billionaires than there are writers who make a living from writing. Okay, so like you're more likely to be a billionaire than to be a successful writer. And
Really? I
because
didn't know that. Wow.
yeah, and I don't have any problems telling you that because I know it won't throw you off. But for
Wow.
you to actually make it in writing, something like that can't stop you. And for you to be 40 grand up on your first book, you're already in like the top 1% of writers and you haven't even published yet. And
Right.
and this is purely on self-belief because it's obviously not on the writing, nobody's read it yet.
Right.
Your self-belief is obviously transferred into your persuasion and your marketing. You're basically just telling everyone what you feel about your own ability and they're buying it because your frame is so strong.
Exactly. Yeah. And when you
And
said that, actually, by the way, when you said there's more billionaires than successful writers, when you said, what threw me off, the first thing I thought of was like, damn, Stephen King and J.K. Rowling are both. You know what I mean? So there's also writers that are billionaires. So that's the
yeah,
first thing in my mind. So I got kind of excited when I heard that. I was like, damn, so it's more likely to be a billionaire.
right.
That's good news.
See, most people would be like, oh my God, there's no point in writing. That would be their first reaction So that piece of information is, I give up. What's the point?
Yeah.
And yours is like, yay, I'm going to be a billionaire.
Yeah. That just fired me up for the day. I'm not gonna lie.
And this is what I'm saying. This will be foreign to you. Everybody else, the other 99%, they go the other direction when they hear that bit of news. But the science is really clear on it. Optimism is far more successful than pessimism. That basically, if you
Yeah,
think you
for
can, you're
sure.
far more likely to. And I think that
Oh yeah.
it doesn't need to be anything spiritual or woo-woo or anything to do with
Nah.
manifesting.
Yeah.
It's just your behavior is going to be solid in a straight line forward and blast through the obstacles. It's mathematical, right?
Yeah. There won't even be obstacles at a certain point. You know.
And this is, my own mediocre success has come from this approach. Like these days, I take an action and then clean up afterwards rather than thinking about what perfect would look like. I just bowl forward like this is going to work out. And ever since
Yeah.
taking that approach, it has. So
Yeah.
it's
It's really funny. Yeah. Yeah. It
I
really
don't know
does
if
work
you
that way.
well, we'll come back to this because I'm going to try and get your insights on how you might be able to pass on the ability to reduce self-doubt to someone else. But what I really wanted to find out about is how. Okay, so here's my impression of you. Uh, my main focus of my work is honesty. I've got this basic theory that quality of life comes from confidence. Confidence comes from shamelessness about who you are. Shamelessness comes from honesty. So honesty is like the tip of the arrow if you want to have a good life. You just be real, real honest all the time, and you'll love yourself.
Mm.
Now, the only times I've made the exception to that rule is when I've worked with psychopaths and corrections because they
That's what I was just
clearly
thinking.
they thoroughly enjoy manipulating, deceiving. The only time I saw them uncomfortable was when they were being honest. They actually looked much more comfortable when they were pulling my strings, and they were good at fucking, they manipulated the shit out of me. And even though I was well trained, my impression of you is that you really are being honest. Now, I'll never know. Um, but you say things that are so honest it wouldn't be in your best interest. Like there could be dishonest things you would say that would be more appealing to people, and that's what convinces me that you are being honest, like in your TikTok videos and stuff.
Yeah, that's the interesting part though, is that a lot of people, I'd love that you noticed that. So a lot of people, and I am actually being honest, but this is the thing. This is the first time I've done it my whole life, I would say, because even I think, yeah, last September, a girlfriend was I seen in her phone it was like traits of a psychopath, and it triggered me that she was like, I was like, what? I was like, you think I'm a psychopath? I have empathy. Why would you think that? No one benefits from me. Benefit everyone around me. How would a psychopath? They'd be self-serving, and I took it very to heart, you know. But the reason that I'm honest about it, and the reason that you can probably pick up on it, that because that is true, is because it works in my favor. You know what I mean? A lot of people are like, "You're not a psychopath. A psychopath would never out themselves." And I was like, again, you got to really look into it because psychopaths work very well when the rules are in their favor. So if I am gonna write, and I want to direct too. So my book trailers, like, are doing art or whatever, just
Yeah.
writing, cinematography, and art. I like doing that. If I can do that, if I hit the lottery, I'm still doing that. I love doing that shit. It's very gratificating or whatever the word is. But I get gratification from it. You know what I mean? It serves me well. But if I can be honest and my honesty is going to work, because if you're a horror writer in the off, if you read horror books or you watch horror movies and you find out the writer of the book or the director is a psychopath, everyone wants to fall asleep to a documentary and get in the mind of a psychopath. So I'm well aware that that will work, mixed in with like the whole thing that girls have over it and shit. It's just like, just it works, to be honest. That's the only reason I tell people that all the time. In no way am I trying to like help uh people know the signs or anything. It's 100% for me. But it does work, you know, I could see where it works both ways. And I don't really mind that it does. Like if someone can be like, hey, oh, thank you. Like I didn't know that my boyfriend was one. Like I was wondering. I'm like, like you're welcome. But like at the end of the day, honestly, I'm not like trying to help people realize what it is. It's just solely because I know that it works in my favor to be honest. You know what I mean? Which is kind of ass backwards, but it makes sense, you know?
Well, look, this is my whole philosophy, man, because now you're on the now the more honest you are, the better it works out for you. So you can actually say, I'm just doing this for my own selfish interest. And people are like,
And
wow,
they don't care.
now I want to watch more. He's so transparent.
It's
Um,
the racket of rackets, dude.
exactly. It's
It really works.
the open racket. And you know, like I said, I did a interview with a guy who's got really strong narcissistic personality disorder, which is different. It's much more fragile than
Yeah.
psychopathy, much more, you know, take things personally and get upset a lot and a lot of self-doubt. But what the narcissist, I think the main difference between narcissist and psychopath, the narcissist getting attention is the point. And so for him, being honest about being a narcissist gets him heaps of attention. And he, even if he's honest about that, he gets even more attention. So it's like fucking
Right.
the rich get richer and nothing actually has to be deception. And that's my theory of honesty, is that if you get to what I call radical honesty or powerful honesty, where everything's out in the open, then you end up quite quickly creating a life that's always in your favor, because everything's
Yeah.
going to react to your honesty and only the good shit's going to attract in. And then you can just
Right.
keep being more honest and you just double down. And
Exactly.
I'm
With the
thinking,
narcissism, it actually kind of sounds like a recipe for disaster because at one point, if that tension goes away, what happened? What's that look like then? You know, where my thing is more, I say control to try to be honest, but it's more like, some of it's like in control of my own life too. Like, you know, if I'm like, you know, something stupid can happen, like I could knock over a glass of milk or something, and it'll really frustrate me because it symbolizes like things falling apart, and I like to keep everything, you know, but I think with my thing, it's more like how you said, like with the narcissist, with attention. My thing is like I don't really mind. I don't mind it, but I don't really also. Yeah, actually, you know what? I do kind of like it sometimes, but it's definitely not the driving factor. My thing is that I realize that in order to sell a movie or sell a book, you just need eyes. It's like any other business that you would do. You know, the more customers you have, the more eyes on it, the better you're going to do. And then it's more for me. It's more the recognition. You know what I mean? I want people to recognize like or I guess give me credit in a way, but I wouldn't say attention. I think it's a little bit different. But I think with the narcissism thing, it's like eventually, like, what if your account gets banned? You know, now the next person that runs into you, they're going to need a level of attention that you just can't give them. You know what I mean? As to where if mine goes away, I'm just resilient to where I don't even care. I've had it happen. You know, 600K it gets banned. I don't even care because I just know it'll go back up because I don't think it won't. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
yeah, I think you're onto something here. I mean, the guy I spoke to, and there's different types of narcissists, of course, but he was definitely, he lives or dies on positive attention. So, you know, if he gets
Right.
a bad comment, he sits with it for a week. And if he gets a good one, he gets high. Whereas I think yours sounds much more around the control element. You know, the way I
Yeah.
read it is with psychopathy, the attention is a means to an end. So there, you know, a psychopath will like attention if it's serving the greater goal, but he'll hate
Right.
attention if
So
it gets in the way of the goal. He'd rather be silent and unknown if that was
yeah,
serving the goal.
that that's interesting that you say that because to me, the negative attention also gets to the goal. I
Right.
don't mind at all. You know, I mean, I do like to see, you know, that there's more good than bad, which oddly there is. You'd think it'd be the other way around. But if you see someone else post one of my videos and you go look at the comments, totally different. People are like, oh, this dude's glorifying it and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, no, because I'm trying to be a horror director at the end of the day. That's my main goal is to be a director. And horror is the most woman empowering genre that there is because the final girl, you never heard of a horror movie where the guy lives at the end and the girl doesn't, you know? So
Yeah.
you could say that, but it's the same thing as like Ted or Zac Efron playing Ted Bundy. You could say what you want about him, but he's doing a job. He's an entertainer. You know what I mean? And it's again, it's not like I'm doing anything to hurt anybody. I'm just being honest about it and I'm using it for my favor. But it's interesting because if you look at comments that other if someone else posts my video to a platform that's just open, it's 90% negative. But if it's on my platform, you can kind of start to see where that control factor comes in. It's like knowing where to target, how to get them, you know. And a big part of that was like just be honest, bro. You have the perfect holding thing that people want to hear about. Just say it, you know, it works in your favor. But what I'm getting to is that when I see negative comments, they're less, you know, on mine, like on my platforms, but I don't mind it. It's just a number to me. You know what I mean? So it could be all negative on mine, and it wouldn't bother me at all because it would be like the engagement is what because a good movie. I've heard about good movies from bad reviews. A lot of us didn't even know who
Yep.
someone was until they got canceled. So to me, it doesn't even matter. I think that both work equally. Actually, maybe even I think the bad attention might even work better than the good. To be honest.
Well, there's a famous case study you might want to look into. There's a book called "I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell" by Tucker Max, and there was Ryan. Oh shit, I forgot his name. The Stoic writer Brian Holiday was involved in the marketing, and they deliberately falsified negative feedback, negative reviews of the book and stuff to sell it, and it worked. Uh,
Wow,
and I'm not saying people should do that, but they
it makes
understood
sense. That doesn't
marketing.
shock me at all, though.
Yeah, they understood marketing beyond what anybody else did at the time, and they turned an unknown guy into a best-selling writer by making it look like he was
Wow,
controversial and causing riots and stuff when none of it was actually happening.
that's psychopathic right there.
Yeah, I've often wondered, like, because I'm really into the Stoic philosophy, and Stoic philosophy looks like a kind of psychopath on a leash sometimes. Um,
Yeah.
I'm really interested. What was the turning point for you, if you remember? And it might not be just one moment where you came to the conclusion that you're going to try this honesty thing, especially broadcasting it out to an audience.
Um, Let me think. I think it was because there was an actual. I know there was an actual one where it happened. It might have been something I can't remember exactly, but I'll give you like an example. Sorry. I think it was. I think I was just posting videos like edits, because at first I had the idea to like if you really scroll through my TikTok and go down to last year, even this time last year, I was more doing that like kind of mob boss, in a suit smoking cigars, and I was just gonna sell a phony course. You know what I mean? But then again, I was thinking like, would I do that if I hit the lottery? And I wouldn't. So it wasn't really, it was just it honestly was too easy. Like you could just make a million. Anyone could make $1 million off selling. Or like these dudes, they do steroids and they sell a fitness course. It's
Yeah, right.
so easy. And so to me, that just wasn't. I don't know. But really, what it was again, it kind of falls into control. I was watching a movie. I won't trash the movie, but it was a terrible ending on a new horror movie, and it pissed me off so bad. And I was like, if I could be on that set and everyone just had to listen to me, this movie would have been better. And I meant it, and I still believe that 100%. And then I was like, okay. And then the same night, I was trying to find a good. I watched a Jack the Ripper documentary, and I was trying to find a movie, and there wasn't one. There was no movies, and the only movies there was, the Ripper was only in the movies for a total of 3-4 minutes, and I was like, they don't have a modern remake. Why the fuck? It's the first big. The name alone would sell. It just blew my mind. So that I started doing kind of like more almost like even if you go back and look in like December, it was kind of almost like it. I had like a vampire vibe going on it, like trench coat. I wasn't really fully sold on the writing the Jack the Ripper restart retelling the story, but it was more, just making kind of those eerie edits, portraying that villain character. And I think someone in the comments, I don't know for sure, but I remember seeing a few maybe even where they were like, "Oh, we love a good psychopath," or "We love a psychopath," or "Everyone," or something like that. And then it just clicked, and I was like, they don't even know. And I actually know this was what it was because I made a joke with my girlfriend, and I was like, I actually am one. That's funny. And I was like, I'm about to just say that. You know what I mean? And then that's kind of where it came from. I was just like, oh, like quickly realized like, you know what I mean? Like this will work. And then I went as far as exposing like my mirror here.
Yeah,
It's like I don't need them now, but it's just a thing. Every like few months you switch them out because it's a thing you've done your whole life. So they really don't need to be there. But I went as far as showing that. And I was like, I'm about to just completely out myself because it's gonna work in my favor. And even she was like, I don't know though, you could get negative feedback. And then I was like, I don't think that's how that's gonna work, dude. I think that it's gonna be like, you know, like even if I was to write this book and go do a series of serial killings, it would be a bestseller. So it's like if I just am honest about this is like the best case scenario. And so I think that's where it was. Someone just kind of said that without knowing that was true. And I was like, well, man, it'd work even better if they knew that.
yeah, because that's what caught my attention about you at first. was the mirror thing. I was like, holy
Yeah.
shit, he's actually got practice pictures. I knew these guys did the practicing, you know? Um, and I used to actually, like I said, I've got some of the traits. I used to practice in a mirror, like practice smiling and stuff like that, so I could
Mhm.
master like how I looked. It wasn't that it wasn't real, it's just I wanted to make sure I knew what it looked
Yeah,
like.
everyone does that kind of try to like,
Yeah.
yeah. And mine's not too, that's a little, I wouldn't say, I mean, this might sound like classic psychopath shit, but I don't think that I actually have to do that. And that's another thing I'm sure you want to get into though. So I'll wait, but is that I do feel some emotion. You know what I mean? So I don't like I do get excited or like a lot of people will be like, oh, when you're talking about your book or directing, you get like jittery and excited. And it's like it does actually excite me. So I feel like, and like anything else, it's like that's just more of a habit thing. Like it feels the mirror, it's like having posters in your house and you take them down. If you grew up in a room full of posters, you're gonna want pictures around your house, I would assume, So it's kind of like it just the mirror looks naked without them. It's not like I even use them anymore, but it's just kind of like aesthetic for me. It's just comforting to see them there.
Well, that and the thing that really stood out to me was I think in quite a few of your videos you show a clip where you got what appears to be your brain scans, um,
Yep.
and showing the sort of the lack of activity in different lobes and such. And one of the things I always go on about with my clients is like, whatever you are, if you own it, people will be okay with it. You can be fucking anything, but if you're
Right.
ashamed of it, that's the frame they'll take as well. So if you're autistic, you can either be fucking autistic and people will be like,
Right. Yeah.
or you can be like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm autistic, and everybody will give you shit about it. And so for you to go, here's my brain scan, it's quite literally like, here's the inside scoop, like nothing's left to be hidden. Um,
Yeah. And that came from people talking about which I don't know. This is the one thing that people say that bothers me. They'll be like, he has dead eyes, and I just don't think that's true at all. I don't really. I don't know. I think that's them kind of getting into like, oh, he's got a black soul and all that. But then I was like, well, that actually is interesting because that's around the area in the brain. The what is it? The prefrontal cortex. Where the lack of activity exists. So I could see sometimes if I'm not catching it, which I guess would be masking to an extent where like there doesn't look like there's life there. You know what I mean? So that's where I was like, oh well, that's even more. And I kind of doubled down on it, like you said.
Yeah, I've always found the eyes thing interesting because I worked with quite a few killers and the eyes thing they turned on and off. Like they could be quite lively, engaged. I felt like we were connecting. And then, especially once I got really well trained in managing manipulation, once I started calling out their tactics, after a while the
Yeah.
shadows would come down. I'd be like, oh shit, I'm in a room with an animal, like there'd be times where I'm like,
Yeah.
I just called it the crocodile, where I was just seeing nothing but lizard, and I was just an object to them. And I was like, but of course, this is on a spectrum. There are guys I worked with who I really think felt nothing but like rage and thrill. That was the limit of their emotions. That's why their behavior was so extreme. Where
Yeah, that makes sense.
from your content, I definitely get the impression that you've got a greater range. Um,
Oh yeah.
and the way I want to, definitely the way I really want to explore that with you is fatherhood. So I'm a new dad, and I was really worried, man. Like before I had a kid, I'm like, fuck, am I gonna feel much? Like I don't
Yeah.
feel much about
Congratulations.
anything. Yeah, thank you. And I was like, and then as soon as she was born, I was like flooded with feeling. I was like, oh, okay, all right, I'm not completely off the scale.
Yeah.
But I was really, as soon as I saw that, there's some video where you like click your fingers when you want your kid to hold your hand if there's a creep around or whatever. And I was just
Yeah.
like, geez, I'm like that all the time, walking around like I'm spotting the creeps because I used to work with them and shit. And I was like, oh, that guy's a pedo. Come over here.
Are you talking about when they're like, you kind of become a predator when you have a kid?
Yeah, I can. I
As
feel
far as
like,
being, you have to think, you start to think like one. Yeah, it's really
yeah.
weird, but it's a defensive thing.
Yeah, well, I used to work with a lot of like really predatory pedophiles and sex traffickers and stuff. And so, like, I know their tactics, I know kind of what they look like. It's hard to explain, but I can see them and I can
Oh
see the
man, it's
potential.
awful.
So I'm like, it's hard for me to turn that off. But, I was really interested, like, tell me a bit about what it's like for you to be a dad, how you feel about your kids, what fatherhood means to you, that kind of stuff.
It's the only thing I think I truly care about, other than wanting to gain a level of control in my own life and just in general. And like again, not to go back to this because I know that's classic psychopath shit to fucking shift it, but I meant to say this earlier. I think what better job would uh who would be a what better director could you imagine than would be a psychopath? Because
Right.
think about it, they're completely, you're directing, you have to do that. So I think other than that, my kids are the only thing I care about. And it really bothers me when people are like, oh, well, do you love, even when they ask, honestly, if I love my kids, it kind of fucking infuriates me a little bit because it's like, I don't know, it just seems like such a dumb fucking question. But I get it, I guess, from an outsider. But yeah, no, I'm the same way. The way I look at it is I thought I felt love beforehand like anybody else. And I'll just use the way my grandma said it. She said, you don't, you're about, before I had my first daughter when I was 19, she said, you're about to know what unconditional love is. And I was like, well, I love you unconditionally. And she was like, no, you don't. And I was like, yes, I do. Like, I love you. She's like, no, you don't. And I was like, what? And she was like, you're about to find out what unconditional love is. And as soon as Carly came out, I was like, holy shit. I get the difference. Like I wouldn't, you know, I didn't realize at the time, but I don't know if I'd necessarily die for my grandma
Mm.
because especially not now when I have a kid that I have to be there for. So yeah, but yeah, it was just instant like love for sure. And that's just like the thing that bothers me about it because I almost, like when you're telling like say like you're out with the boys and like an ex walks up and like your wife doesn't believe you, but you're like, no, I didn't cheat. Like I actually didn't. But then she starts questioning you to where you feel like you're defending a lie when you're actually telling the truth.
Mm.
That's kind of how it feels when I talk about loving my kids, which kind of bothers me. But again, it's like, even the worst psychopath ever has emotion. No psychopaths don't have any emotion because in order to manipulate, which that's a psychopath's favorite thing to do. But I'm not really too into it because I don't need to, other than like marketing. I
Yeah.
kind of get my fix with that. But to manipulate, you have to empathize. So that shows a level of empathy. You know what I mean? And I think people don't realize that. So even if it was like the most severe case, and another thing is too is like my children are extensions of myself. So you know what I mean? It's kind of like I don't know. It kind of reminds me of like a pit bull with their owner. You know what I mean? In a way,
Mhm. Yep.
like they're my owner. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah, that's what because one of the things that I've always been fascinated by is like parents who don't step up to protect their kid, and a lot of most every parent think they will, but if on almost a daily basis they'll let their kid down by people pleasing the teacher or not speaking up when grandma's stepping over the line, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas a psychopath will be like, I'll burn this whole world down just to keep your world a little bit more comfortable. And I don't think
Yeah.
people understand that kind of capability. Because again, most people psychopath means serial killer. And
Right.
they don't know the range. They haven't studied. Like I said, I've been studying this my whole adult life. I'm so fascinated by the topic. And
Right.
once somebody put me onto the idea that the sadistic, harmful ones are a small niche of the grand spectrum, and that if you haven't yet, read The Wisdom of Psychopaths by Jim Dutton. One of them, he talks about like how surgeons, how impossible it would be to be a surgeon if you didn't have at least really strong
Yeah.
ruthlessness
You'd
traits.
be emotional and shaken and yeah.
Oh, how would you cut open like a baby's body with a 90% chance of killing them unless you're just like, this
Yeah.
is meat and this
You'd
is my
want a
job?
psychopath. You'd pray for a psychopath in that scenario.
Hmm. Well, even I was wondering, like, you're saying who would make a better director. I look at the top directors, and I'm kind of a movie guy myself, and I like the behind the scenes shit. And I have no doubt Tarantino is very psychopathic. I have no doubt that
Oh
even
yeah.
Spielberg and those guys, they're ruthless as all fuck.
Oh yeah.
They amount that they make people cry, and the control and the
Yeah.
assertiveness they have. Like, you can't be a
Yeah.
people pleaser in a top Hollywood director.
No, yeah.
You never.
Yeah, that's funny you said that. Yesterday I was saying, someone was like, would you put your kids in a movie? And I was like, oh yeah, especially my son, because if I end up playing the Ripper, which I don't know if I will, when I'm gonna do after the trilogy, I'm gonna do a book on his upbringing, The Ripper Rising, which is actually very similar to mine. And
Mm.
I was like, if I played the Ripper, it'd be really interesting to go through and use my son as the younger Ripper because it would look crazy. He looks just like me, you know. And I told them that I would make my children cry to get a good shot, to
Right.
get the shot. I would not physically, obviously, but I would scare them or do something to make them uncomfortable just to get that shot. So that's like the level of ruthlessness it would go to. You know what I mean? Which it's not. I wouldn't say ruthless, but some people be like, "Whoa, dude, you're gonna make your kid cry to get the shot of them really crying?" Like, yeah, it's it'll be done in 10 minutes, and then they'll have it forever, and they'll be like, "Hell yeah, that's sweet." That worked. But I think again, that's where you have to go with it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I have no doubt you have strong feelings towards your kids, and yeah, I think if someone was to go inside your body, it'd be a different experience for what they think from their own experience of being a loving parent or whatever. But in some areas,
Yeah,
it's
that's the thing.
stronger.
That's the thing because I see people that maybe not like bluntly say it, but they claim that they are like better parents. And I just think that I've mastered parenting more than anything in my life, actually, because the same people that do that, like we were just talking about, like I'll drive by and I'll be like, like your kid's right there. If I was a weirdo, I could just take your kid. There should be no scenario where that happens. And a lot of people, people have literally called me a psychopath for this. They didn't even know it. Like my aunt's neighbors, we had this big argument about this, and this is really, you'll probably think this is interesting. They were saying, can Carly, my oldest daughter, go down to one of the friends' houses or whatever? And I was like, no, like I know you guys, she can play here, but I don't want her. She's not playing. I'm not outside right now, so I don't want her to be outside. They're like, well, she's a kid. You got to let her play outside. And I do get what people are saying, but my kids don't play outside. I do not let them play outside. If I'm not outside, you're not outside. I don't care if there's a backyard with a 10-foot concrete wall. If I'm not outside, you are not outside. If you can't see me, I can't see you, and it's razor thin. That's just the only way it's going to be. And I make up for it. We take them on a bunch of vacations a year and all that, buy them whatever they want. You know what I mean? But you cannot play outside if I'm not outside. This is not happening. So take that out. And it's best time ever because kids don't even want to fucking be outside. But someone was arguing with me about this. And they were like, well, you still have to let her be a kid and all this. And I was like, well, she can't be a kid if she gets taken. You know what I mean? And I don't want to be the parent on the news that's like crying, like, oh, I just wish I would have, if only I could go back. And no, my thing is just do shit like it's the second time and you won't make any mistakes or not nearly as many. So I'm just going to think like that already happened and this is my second chance. You know what I mean? And then this is another thing that I thought was interesting is right before that, we were talking about they were in Florida. They were on some trip in Florida. And she was talking about how she wouldn't let her go in the ocean, like the daughter. And I was like, I remember asking her, I was like, was it, are you scared of like the current pulling out? She's like, oh no, sharks. I've always been so terrified of sharks. And I was like, hmm. And so I didn't really want to do this, but I was like, that's interesting because the odds of a shark attack is like one in, I think, 11 million. And that's just getting bit. You'll still have a kid with one leg. Or I think no, it's one in like 250,000 or something like that, just to get bit. The odds of dying and not seeing your kid ever again, which would be the same case if your kid got taken playing outside, it's actually like 1 in 11.1 million for a shark attack causing death, which is crazy. That's huge odds. So I was like, but the odds of getting abducted in your own neighborhood in Michigan is like 1 in 300,000. So you're worried about the wrong sharks. You know what I mean? That's very interesting. You're so scared of something that's way less likely, but you let your kid run around the block. You have a better chance letting her swim in the ocean every day than you do let her ride her bike around the neighborhood. And she was like, huh. And I was like, you know what I mean?
Now this is okay. So this is really fucking interesting for me because this is where people have to stop and think about things. Like, so in Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, one of the main points he makes is that people are just bad at statistical thinking. That's where most of our cognitive biases can be under this umbrella of just bad statistical thinking. It's why
Yeah.
casinos stay in business. And this is the
Yeah.
interesting, like I work with, I've worked with people who are struggling psychologically my whole adult career. And as a coach now, I help people with confidence problems. And I'd say a vast majority of them were sexually abused in some way as children. And I know statistically speaking that if I want my daughter to have a great life, the best thing I can do is make sure she doesn't get sexually abused. That gives her like the best
Yeah.
odds just to not have that happen. It
Yeah.
happens like 2 out of 3 girls probably, and maybe more if they sort of extrapolate the non-reporting rates.
Yeah, and not to cut you off, but there's a ripple effect with that too, because my mom was sexually abused by her grandpa from 7 to 12, and so that rippled into my nurture, which you know what I mean, worked in my favor, but you know what I mean.
Oh
So
yeah,
it
it creates
ripples.
a legacy. It takes generations for the effects to wear off.
Yeah.
It assumes everything goes well. And so there was an interesting moment for me. We're on holiday in Italy, and Italians are really affectionate and friendly with strangers. It's not unusual for old people to come and touch your kid and stuff like that on the head or whatever, because that's their culture.
Right. Yeah.
Which for someone like me, I'm just like red flagging the whole fucking
Yeah.
time.
No
And
way.
anyway, so the ones next to us, they bought her a gift. And I ended up having this big argument. Well, more of a debate with my missus, where I was just like, that could be nice behavior, but everything they're doing so far is checklist down to the like perfect fucking grooming strategy. Like that's
Yeah.
exactly what someone grooming would also do. And that's the kind of, the real threat of grooming is it looks like nice behavior. And
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I was now starting to be really sort of standoffish and just uncomfortable to the point of rudeness with these neighbors.
Yeah.
But the point was, I wanted them to let them know that like dad's watching and
Yeah.
doesn't care
Exactly.
about your feelings. So that
Hmm.
if they were grooming, I'm presenting that like this is high risk, like this is the kind of
Yeah.
family you're not going to get away with this with. Um,
Yeah. I agree with that 100%.
but a lot of people would
100.
struggle with that, and a lot of people.
I don't understand that because don't risk being wrong. That's one of those things where confirmation bias is very necessary. I think. You know what I mean? And again, it's the odds is like you said, it's the odds of, you know, people even to get sexually abused. I don't know perfectly, but I know that it's usually people that they know.
Oh yeah, it's family
You
most
know?
of the time.
So no one's off the table. I've never once actually had my kids be babysat, not once. I have 3 kids by 3 different moms, so obviously we all get along great too. But you know, obviously there's instances where they have to, you know, but like my own grandpa, I don't trust him just because he didn't kill his dad, actually.
Hmm.
I think that's bizarre. That would be the same. It would be the way the situation my mom was in, and everyone knows better, and they no one. I still don't know. No one will tell me what actually happened if he went to jail, if he died. No one will tell me, but I do know that my grandpa didn't do anything about it, and that blows my fucking mind. That would be like one of my kids getting abused by my dad or stepdad.
Yeah.
100%. I'm throwing everything away in that moment. 100%. I'm not calling the cops. So I just don't trust him just off of a character thing. Like, and I'm sure you agree with that. It's just at that point you have to just do it. There's no like you're not no. You know what I mean? So I just don't trust him. But even people that even like my stepdad or my real dad, if they want the kids for them, I'm just like, no. It's not even that it's not even to the point where I don't even have to really think about the abuse thing actually too much because it's to the point where for any reason, like even if you don't watch them enough or again, statistically, I know that they're always safer next to me. And so that's just the only thing that I allow when I have them. You know what I mean?
Mm. Look, it's something I battle with all the time because, like you, like I think I want her to have freedom in childhood and so on, but not to the point where I'm actually putting her at risk of like the real dangerous stuff. Like I'm happy to
Right.
for her to climb to the top of the tree, even though she's a bit young for it or whatever. That's not what I'm
Yeah.
scared
Fall,
of.
get hurt. Yeah.
What I'm scared of is the dude watching her on the playground. That's what I'm worried about, right?
Because they're there. They are
Yeah.
there. You know what I mean? And
Well,
we've
yeah.
crossed one with them before. It's very eerie to think about, but yeah, that's where I think it's like, yeah, dude, like I'll just be damned. It's not happening. And that's the thing too. My mom used to always tell me this. She said kids are adults a lot longer than their kids. And I
Yeah.
was like, damn. And it just I don't know what it was about that. It always stuck with me. So it's like, and my kids don't give a shit. They're super happy. They don't even want they're at the point now where they're, you know, they don't even want to go outside because they know, like, you know, like my 5 year old daughter, even if you've seen the movie Lovely Bones,
Yep.
that's her favorite movie, my 5 year old. She just painted a painting, like a Lovely Bones painting. And she was like, she always just says that. I was like, you know, just asking her, and she's like, yeah, Mr. Harvey doesn't look bad, but he's bad. And I'm like, that's not wrong. People are like, you shouldn't let your kids watch horror movies. And again, it's like, even with that, not to go back to that, but it's like, that's the best thing for a kid to watch is to not think shit is sunshine and rainbows immediately. Cause again, you can't always be next to them, you know, and I can have air tags and all their shoes and do the whole 9 yards with that. But It's just like, why don't you go touch the stove? And the reason I even tell my kids this, you don't touch the stove because you know it's stupid to touch the stove. And you know that it's stupid to do that because you're going to get hurt. So it's the same reason it's kind of stupid to me for kids to not, I mean, obviously like sex scenes and stuff like that, or maybe brutal, gore scenes. I get that. But to not let a kid watch a movie that provokes fear in them, I think is dumber than not letting, them touch the stove, to be honest. I just think, what is that doing? It's just giving them a leg up on realizing that it's, even the dude in the Mickey Mouse costume, he could be a weirdo. And that may be why he's in that costume. So I just think I have like a huge, like, I just get real defensive about like the horror genre because I think it's so, even with the woman thing and with that, it's just like everyone's always giving me shit like, oh, your kids are obsessed with horror, you pushing on them. And I'm like, that's what I do. Like, you know what I mean? That's all their dad does. So like they're good. Kids want to be like their dad. But also I just think it's a really good thing, because it's like, again, like, or the movie Prisoners with Jake Gyllenhaal. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I haven't watched those movies. I
Like, yeah.
strategically make them watch those because it's like, this, you see how quick that happened? They played on that RV, boom, they're gone. You know what I mean? And I was like, this is just a movie. And the end of this movie in real life, I never see you again. So if you want that to happen, go ahead and you go play outside. But I let them make their own decision to where they're like, which really it's mine. But again, it's like, what is the harm in that? Like but you can go talk to them about stranger danger, but you can't let them watch a movie that makes them, like be afraid of the dark. Be afraid of the dark. You know what I mean? Yes, you should be. You know what I mean? You don't know what's there.
Yeah, I think we have some similar thoughts on that, but I know a lot of other people don't. It's interesting. I
I just don't even see the argument. I don't even get the argument. I don't understand the argument. I
yeah.
don't get it. But then again, there's a lot of, I seen this, you probably seen this TikTok video where they were asking a bunch of people, like, would you kill for your kids? And everyone was like, oh, no. And I was like, what? So I guess it's those type of people that don't agree with that. I would think it's just stupid to me to not, I would love to actually have a separate thing and like talk to someone who disagrees with that. And I just would love to pick their brain on why they think that's not effective. You know what I mean? It just blows my mind, honestly.
Well, I've had the unfortunate experience of dealing with the families, not only of the victims, but of the perpetrators, and just how shocked they are about
Oh, yeah.
who was, it was their brother or their son or whatever, and them sort of struggling to reconcile that the person they trusted was this monster. Um,
Hmm.
and what that taught me more than anything else is I can't trust my own trust. And that is,
Right.
I can fully trust
Yeah.
someone and be fully wrong. And that's how I need to operate. I need to operate on this idea
Wow.
like my judgment might be off and I need to act accordingly. And most people, they won't accept that they can get their judgment wrong. And that's how, I mean, this is why predators love places like the church and like being, a doctor or something
That's why
that's
it's really common
respected.
there.
Yeah, because people are going to trust their trust. People are going to go, well, I trust them,
I
therefore.
never heard that. I like that. I couldn't trust my trust. I love that.
Oh, I just saw too much counter evidence to how bad people are at judging who the threat is. Um,
Right.
and the funny thing was, is it means that I just behave in a way where I don't need to get it right. I
Right.
just behave in a way where I don't need to make judgment calls. I just don't allow her to be in a situation where I'm hoping
I
like
agree with that. I literally agree with that 100%. It's like I don't even need to worry about being wrong. Like the odds of me getting bit by a shark is fucking zero if I don't go in the ocean. So the odds of my kids getting taken when they're under my watch, it's impossible for that to happen. You know what I mean?
I'll tell you what, probably the best strategy you can use, and I'll just share this from experience, is you teach your kids not to keep secrets because
Yeah.
ultimately predators need secrecy. And if they know the kid's going to tell, they're not going to do it. This is for not so much the snatching in a van, but more the family groomer type. Um, so that's been something that causes controversy when I'm like telling off grandparents, like, no, no, we don't do like you got to keep this a secret from mum and dad. Like she's going to
Yeah.
tell
No.
us, and she's going to actually. We did this thing with her where she gets like if somebody offers her a treat and a secret, she'll get double from us if she comes and tells us. So
Ooh, I like
basically,
that.
if someone tries to give her lollies, if she says no and comes to us, then she gets twice as many lollies. So we just made a
That's
system
a good.
where it's super rewarding and it's
Yeah.
it's so nice. The other day, I've seen it a few times now. It's really paid off. She's only 3.5,
Oh
And
wow.
some like really just nice old lady, and I know she's fine. Some nice old lady will come up to her in the shop, like, "Oh, would you like a lollipop?" Straight away, my daughter's just super defensive, like, "Go away!" And then she comes and tells us and gets her reward. I'm like, "Fuck
Yeah,
yeah!"
and even in those scenarios, you're like you said, like it's a, not everyone's a monster. Like you can tell, right? A nice old lady, like whatever, But
Mm.
it's like, no, still do it. You know what I mean? Like, because if
Yeah.
you'll do it to her, like same thing with my actually Carly might have been around 3 or 4. We would go to this Coney Island. It's like a restaurant that was by our house, and they would have different characters, be dressed up in the suits and all that. And me and my mom were making a joke, and she was like, "Do you think she doesn't want to take a picture with Mickey Mouse because he's fucking 6 feet tall and she thought he was small?" I was like, "No, I don't think she trusts him." And she's just like she'd be excited watching him go around the other kids because they bring their kids there and stuff. But when he got to her, she was like, "Fuck that." She's like, "I don't even want to." I'm like, "That's my girl, dude. Yeah, fuck him." Like seriously, fuck him, dude.
And that's yeah, it's a lot of people really struggle with that. They call it rude or something like that. And
I'd rather be
I,
rude than wrong in that scenario.
well, dude,
You
I
know?
hope my girl grows up with the courage to be rude because most of the stuff I
Yeah,
see in the work I do is directly related from people being unwilling to displease others and the
yeah,
compromises they make. It really does lead to disastrous outcomes. And like I
yeah.
said,
That's another thing that when I think with psychopaths that are parents is like, I don't really care at all if someone is offended. Not even in like a rude way where it's like, I don't give a fuck how you feel. Like I know I can't even care if I tried. If you are put off by me saying you can't watch my, like, I don't even care. So it kind of works.
well, let's zero in on this. And you can tell me if you ever like if we need to wrap up the call or whatever, but I can just
Oh no, you're good. I got plenty of time.
okay, cool. Because I think the number one thing that we can learn from psychopathy is the magical state of not really caring what other people think. And as you say, it's not that defiant, like, I don't give a fuck what people think, because usually that means the
Yeah,
opposite when someone's being like that.
exactly.
They're
Yeah.
trying to look like they don't care, which means they do. But I understand, like, and I know this from my own experience, it's something I've kind of cured in myself once I learned to lean into some of my more psychopathic traits. I've gotten to the point where I just don't like, I'll upset the entire room to do what I think is right now. Whereas in my old life, I couldn't even dream of it. I did the exact opposite. I compromised constantly.
Right.
I want like it might be hard for you to, I guess, to kind of teach it or pass it on if it's natural to you. But let's just start with the overview. Like, what's your understanding of first off, what other people do, this kind of where they care what others think and they're emotionally affected by opinions and judgments of others versus what it's like to be you.
Um, yeah, my girlfriend always wants to know this. She's like, "How do you just not care?" And I'm like, "Dude, why are you being so emotional?" And that's kind of like a guy-girl dynamic, I guess, more than you'd think. But I'm like, I was like, "Why do you even care?" She's like, "What do you mean? Why do I care?" She's like, "You're a psychopath. Obviously, you don't care." And I'm like, "Oh, here we go with the psychopath shit." But yeah, I just don't understand. What my bad? What was the question? How?
What do you think it's like to be other people, and how does that differ to how it is to be you in this kind?
I think I think other people, when you when you're trying to make storage on your phone, you delete the things you don't need,
Mm,
or you weigh out the things that you need more than the things you don't need. And obviously, if you ask anybody, they all know, hey, do you need this negative view on yourself based on what a random person you'll never meet said, or do you need someone to, do you need camaraderie and companionship that's going to make confidence? Which one do you need? They know what they need, but they don't. I don't know. They just keep though. And again, once your phone is so full, if you don't delete anything, you can't take anything new in. So you're kind of, that's actually, I've never even thought about it like that. That's actually a good analogy. But yeah, just delete the files you don't need. And I guess it does sound like, okay, like easier said than done. But I don't understand what someone gains from self-doubt. I do not understand it. And I don't understand how people don't realize projection either, because 9 times out of 10, and this is not to say that no one's going to be critical of you that cares about you, but no one's going to criticize you that's doing better than you, not in the way that's giving you self doubt. Like if I see, if I'm once I'm like a director or even now, like I've even seen people that are on their third book and they're asking me for advice on marketing, and it's my first book. You know what I mean? Which is ass backwards. But I don't even. There's nothing bad I can say to them. I'm just like, well, honestly, to be honest with you, like you're not marketing at all. You're kind of like you have this like bookshelf behind you. You got like a really single mom type niche, but you're selling these like spunk, splatterpunk, dark romance novels. I don't see where that's correlating with an audience. They're just seeing someone in a sweater. Like they don't, you'd be better off, role playing, getting killed on an edit or something, or make it entertaining. You know what I mean? You get what I mean? Kind of like play the part a little bit, like sell it, make change your aesthetic. But my point is that I'm giving them like advice and telling them what they're doing wrong, but it's in a way to where it's not like I'm not like, why are you even doing that for? You're not going to get anywhere with that. I just do not think that, even of other people. And I don't think that's a psychopath thing at all. I just think that people who, for example, if someone was asking you about starting a podcast, you could look at it and be like, that ain't the way to do it, bro. But you're not going to be like, you're never going to make it with
Mm.
podcast. You're never going to do it. You would never say that. You'd be like, that doesn't work, bro, but I would change it up and do it like that. That's constructive. So people don't realize when someone's projecting on them. I think that's number one. That's number one. Think of any time, and we've done it, everyone's guilty of it. Like, I mean, I don't know, like the people that leave comments on videos, I've never done that, but like, there's been times where I was like, look at this fucking guy, you know what I mean, or whatever. But it's like, think of the place you were in when you said that. You weren't fucking happy. You're not going to hit the lottery tomorrow, or have some massive achievement, and then you're going to go around and be like, oh yeah, you can't fight. You're going to be handing money out. You're going to be in a good mood. Like, you got to think of the projection. You know what I mean? What is someone actually doing right here? Is this even personal or not? And I think that's where I'm better at realizing it's not personal, because it's not either way. But I think other people could probably take from it in that way. Like, when someone doubting yourself can, I guess you could do it on your own, but I think it comes more from accepting negative views from other people. So if you just don't accept it because they're projecting, which they are, it's not even delusional. They are. No one's just going to come up to you and tell you a bunch of bullshit about yourself that doesn't know you or does know you if they're not unhappy themselves. So just, I think that is a huge thing that no one talks about. Like, just understand when someone's projecting on you and don't fucking allow it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to allow, like, even girls in my life, like if they're having an attitude or something, I'm just like, you're throwing me off. I don't even want to be around you. You're throwing me off. Like, that doesn't serve me at all. And I can't serve you if you don't serve me. You know what I mean? It's kind of help me help you. But yeah, not to get off topic, but I just think it's more, just know that they're projecting, and that it doesn't, you're going to let this person having a shitty day take it out on you, and then you're going to hold that. That's bizarre to me. You know what I mean? And I often tell people, I don't know if this is a psycho thing or not, but high five the mirror in the morning. Like, I'll even show it as an example. I used to do this. I would go like this, because my point is that, so when people are having a bad day and they just put all that shit on you, you're carrying it with you. And when you wake up, you have a fresh chance. Think of the way most people talk to a stranger. It's very positive. Like, you got this, dude. You're not gonna be homeless forever. Tomorrow will be a better day, but you won't do it to yourself. That's really weird, because to a certain point, you're not even able to talk to people in a kind way, because you're so unkind to yourself that you're miserable. You know what I mean? So I always say, and again, this is kind of like a psycho thing, I guess, maybe a little bit, but there's a new person in the mirror, and they're two different people. So in the morning when you wake up, you're you, and the you that's in the mirror is everything you're projecting on from other people's projections. So you're dumping this whole load of shit on someone who's a stranger. Every day you can wake up and do something. People wake up and go sober 10 years straight out of nowhere. So by dumping all that bullshit onto this new person that's in the mirror, you're fucking yourself over. And now you're doing it to yourself. So I do a thing, or I tell people to do a thing. You just walk up and do this and just tap the mirror. You don't even have to do it hard. It could be like a high five like that, or just do that and just literally high five yourself in the mirror every day. And what that does, I think, is you can fake a smile, and I know this more than anyone. You can fake a lot of emotions, but you can never remember a time when you high five someone where it wasn't really joy, when it wasn't actually like, high fives don't come from like, all right, bro, I'll see you later. It's like, oh my god, like a roller coaster. So I think that this might just be like mastering that, like, whatever, you know what I mean. But if you high five yourself, that when you do that, it's insinuated with a whole lifetime of positive feedback. So if you just high five yourself subconsciously, I think eventually, it might take weeks, months. Eventually, though, I think you start to, it's almost like a physical reminder. You know what I mean? In your brain, it's like when you laugh, you know what I mean? I think to a certain point, kind of let you kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't say forgive yourself or love yourself, but like just give yourself a fighting chance. You know what I mean? Like tell yourself like, what's up, bro? Good morning. Like, and just high five to me and be like, let's get it. And it kind of just dumps all the other shit. It's like, oh, it's just a reminder, but it's also a physical, I think it like does something wiring wise when you do that over and over. And I think it just in time builds up like self-esteem maybe.
Yeah, this all of this, what you're saying, aligns with my own sort of transition from self-doubting to not, and from caring what other people think to not really giving it much of a thought. There's so many factors. So one is you quite quickly identify how invalid that feedback was, and this is assuming you're really actually getting negative feedback and not imagining it. So as you're saying, if somebody's doing that, they're in a bad position and projecting, not this is accurate feedback about who you are. It's
Yeah.
amazing how sort of just logical you are about that. Like, there's no way someone doing well is going to say something like this. One thing I say is like
And
confident people are never cruel. You know,
yeah, they could, and then people get that mixed up, and they're like, "Oh, well, what do you think? Someone doing better than you is never gonna." No, they can still tell you to do something different or that you're doing the wrong thing, but they're not gonna be cruel about it, like you said.
yeah,
And that comes from an inner thing.
there's a difference between helpful feedback and judgment and bullying, and often the vibe you can just feel the difference, especially the
Yeah, I
difference
don't know.
if
I
you
think
asked for it. If you asked for
right. Yeah,
feedback and the person's trying to
it
help.
just like you said, it seems so hard to teach because it just sounds so obvious. It's like if someone walks up and they're just like a dick, it's like a drunk guy at a bar. Like, okay, bro, like who hurt you? Like it's so obvious. Like, bro, like I don't know. It just seems very, very. But again, I guess it's like, yeah. Apparently, it's not because a lot of people just don't think they can do whatever they want. It blows my mind. Not in the sense of like lawlessness, but like I don't understand how every single person doesn't just think I could do whatever I want. That's the part I just logically don't understand at all. It blows my mind. I can't figure. I just don't get it. Like it's just like God, you're choosing that. Like you are comfortable with that for some reason. And again, I think that's because like in your phone, like your drive is full. You don't know how to shed none of that off. And I think the high five thing, I've never even heard no one talk about that, but I've done that for a while. It's a good way to clean the slate every day.
Yeah, well, I think it's symbolic of like, how do you treat yourself? How do you talk to yourself? Is it
Right.
like, is it similar to how an encouraging, loving best friend would treat you and talk to you? Or is it more like an enemy? And the way I see people treat themselves, and that's mostly the coaching work I do, is it's sadism. They're
Yeah.
just
And it's
so
so
unfair.
obvious. It's like you're taking in projections from other people and now you're doing it on yourself. And now they've recruited one and you're gonna do that shit to other people. You know what I mean? So it's like no one likes people like that. Like what you know what I mean? I don't know. I think it might be like it might have started as a masking thing, but now, like you said, it seems like a logical, like just don't allow that. Like, you know what I mean? Just realize, and you know, that's why I was glad I was going to ask you the questions, but I was like, no, this is kind of the whole point is just like say what comes up, like, like naturally. And I wouldn't even have said that, I don't think, on a different day, but I just think that makes sense is like, you know, uh, with the self doubt thing, like realize when it's projection and when it's feedback. You know what I mean? Because there's a huge difference.
Yeah, well, this is something I had to learn manually that you've got as a natural trait. And one of the things I had to learn how to do was get skeptical. One of the questions I always asked is, did I ask this person for feedback? And if the answer is no, then I'm like, then they're forcing this on me. Who does that?
Right.
Why would they do that if they're coming from a healthy, rational, accurate place? And
Yeah.
and they wouldn't. I've never had a confident person try and force their views on me. I've only had insecure people do that.
Never. Right.
Yeah. I think it was Denzel Washington says like, yeah, no one above you is going to hate on you. And
Yeah, that's true. They're going to think you can do it too.
and I thought like, nah, there must be some exceptions. And I just went through my whole life, and I was like, find one person above me who gave me shit, and I can't. I
There's not
fucking
one.
can't bring up a single memory. I've
There's not
only
one.
found people doing worse.
Never happened. It's never happened. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the thing. A lot of people will, and the negative people will defend that, and they'll be like, "No, my boss tells me all the time that it's like, yeah, but that's a different thing. You know what I mean? That's not. That's a. They'll just find ways to make it sound, fit, just make themselves more comfortable in letting that happen. But it's like, yeah, there's it never. I can't think of one either. I did that too. I was like, I'm trying to really think about it now. Like there's not cases where that happens, and it makes sense why that doesn't happen. The same reason we don't do it.
What about, and this may not happen to you all that often, but say rejection from women, perhaps. Like if you make a move, someone says no, or I don't know, you're doing some sort of sales or marketing thing, and you get a no. What's your internal reaction to that when that happens?
I don't have it happen because I orchestrate it to not happen.
Okay.
Actually, no, yeah, it sounds kind of weird, but this is kind of like nowadays, guys don't have to actually talk to girls. They can just swipe up on their story, and that could be their version of shooting their shot. If the girl doesn't respond, you don't really lose much because you didn't actually say, "Hey, do you want to go on a date?" And she said no. She just didn't respond. You can act like that's not what you were even doing. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
You get what I mean with the emoji thing though? Like if she
Sort
says,
of.
"Hey, what's up?" and engage, if you swipe up some hard eyes and then she engages with you, it's like, all right, cool. But if she doesn't, it's not necessarily said that that's what you were trying to do, so it doesn't feel like rejection. So you can just kind of back off from it. You know what I mean? Um, but I kind of do that in a way to where just don't approach anyone first. You know what I mean? Just if you never, and again, it kind of sounds weird because it's like you miss 100% of the shot you don't take. But if you're good at it, you can make them people come to you. So for an example, and I've done this because I don't like rejection. Actually, I really don't at all. But I just don't allow it. I just realize, like, for an example, if me and one of my buddies are sitting right here and we have some girls that are going to come over, the advice that I'm going to give him is do not be pushy. Do not engage at all. This is what I would say. Be like, "Oh, I like your eyes," or "Damn, your hair's. I like that. That shit's sweet. Hell yeah!" And then look away. Engage with her enough where it's just a compliment, like swiping up on some hard eyes, and then completely turn away. And the thing is, again, you can use the statistics and the numbers in this, and girls are really used to guys being pushy, so you stand out immediately when you're not. So I would be like, I would just say something, give her a compliment. I'd be like, "Hey, what's up?" Like, "Holy shit, you're really pretty." And then look away. And then they're going to question. You just get into the mind of a girl. What are they going to do? They're going to be like, "Was that genuine? Was he trying to fuck or was he actually being nice?" And then and just don't make eye contact. They'll come to you. If they don't come to you, they don't, but they probably will because you're not being pushy. And if they don't, you didn't get rejected because you didn't even do anything. You know what I mean? So it works really well. And then, like, for an example, like, even if I give a girl a compliment and then I'm talking to my buddy and they try to say something, I'm like, "Hold on 1 second. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be rude. What were you saying, bro?" And I'll act like I do not, just act completely uninterested. They're not used to that. You know what I mean? But in that way, you're not getting rejected. You're doing enough to show interest and you're opening up the conversation, but you're also making her question if you even want her or not. And females are super competitive. That's why they don't work well together. You know what I mean? So it's kind of interesting. You get what I mean, though? It's kind of ass backwards, but I've seen it work with people. I've actually seen it work. Like my buddy, I had two friends. One was Reese and one was Flea. I had one of my baby mamas come over and she brought her friend, Sequoia. And this is so funny, dude. They're like from the hood and shit. So they're very similar dudes. And so the girls walk in the house. Obviously, I got my baby mama, but Sequoia walks in. So I got two buddies and she has to pick. And my buddy Flea walks right up and he goes, "What you trying to do tonight?" And she was like, "Can I set my fucking purse down?" Like, what the fuck, dude? And then she told me, she was like, "Yeah, I'm not gonna lie." Or my baby mama told me, she's like, "Sequoia wanted to get with Flea. She likes that he had dreads." Like instantly when she seen him, she was like, "Oh yeah." But then as soon as he talked and said that, it was off putting and now she didn't want to. And so I was telling Reese, I'm like, "Well, now here's your shot, bro. All you have to do now is shut the fuck up. She's gonna pick you because you're the last one. You know what I mean? She's gonna pick you." And I was trying to tell him, like, that's crazy. Wouldn't that just drive you nuts? If you knew, like, damn, I had that in the bag and I opened my mouth, that would drive me crazy. So it's like, just be stoic and they'll just come to you. You know what I mean? And another thing is, like, obviously, like, put yourself in a position to where you're around more girls than guys, because then the dynamic flips and they're going to compete for your attention, not the other way around. You know what I mean? If there's like 10 dudes in a room and three girls, the dynamic's all fucked up. So I wouldn't even put myself in that type of dynamic. But yeah, if you go around where there's like maybe 3 or 4 girls and there's only two of you, they're gonna start getting competitive, and it's not even nothing to do with you. It's just the way they are. Not in a disrespectful way. It's just true.
Mm-hmm. No,
But
this
yeah,
is
I think it's backwards.
no, like a lot of the coaching I do is helping guys with dating. And you just outlined, which is almost a mirror of the kind of approach that I teach, which is you have to initiate, but you've got to make them work. And you have to actually be
Exactly.
willing, you have to be willing to lose them and genuinely willing to lose them. It can't be
Yeah.
faked.
And
Um,
it feels better because you didn't put yourself out there too much, you know?
right.
But like, like me, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Whether you're smooth or whether, you know what I mean? You're always better off saying less in that situation. Always, 100%. Don't be rude and obviously open it up, say something, but they're going to question. It becomes more of a competition thing. They just want to win you over at a certain point, and that's what you're essentially trying to do when you talk too much, and that's never going to work that way because they're so used to that.
Well, there's
It's
one thing
kind of
about
fucked, but
yeah, but there's always one thing about psychopathy that I found fascinating, especially when I struggle with women, is psychopaths are notoriously promiscuous and really don't sort of just struggle in that area like I used to. And I used to have a look at it, and while a lot of it was sort of manipulation or so on, there were some elements
uh,
to it that were showing where I was going wrong, like the neediness and the trying too hard and
yeah,
kind of forcing it. I think somebody
and
pointed out
essentially caring too much too.
that was it. That was my main problem. That's most people's main problem, not just in dating, but in all elements of life.
Yeah,
They're
and it is
so attached.
manipulative too.
Yeah.
It really is manipulative. I have this really interesting thought on like manipulation that not being manipulative is more manipulative than being manipulative. So it
Yeah.
really it's like mastery, you know what I mean? But like if a girl is like, for example, like I just do not I'm 29, I've never been to a strip club, I've never been to a club, concerts, I just do not go in public. So I'm not going to date a girl that goes, this is why I don't get controlling guys either, because they'll like try to control girls. And it's like, you don't really have to. Like, you can have boundaries just like them. So if I get, like, matter of fact, the girl that's here right now, I could actually bring her here and she'll tell you, uh, she was like a rave girl and whatever, she came over, flew out from Arizona. We had like a good time and all that. And then out of nowhere, I was like, yeah, I don't think I could ever date you though, because you go to raves. Like, I just couldn't do that. And she's like, whoa, what? And I was like, well, no, I'm just saying I'm going to spare us both the time because I'm telling you 3 months from now, I'm going to get a little more like possessive, obviously. Like, I'm not, once we start to fall in love with each other, we're going to get a little more like, I'm going to change, is what I'm saying. I'm not going to be the way I am now. And it was honest though. And then I was like, and I also don't want to tell you what to do. So I would just, if I see that like you do something that I know would be an issue, I just don't want to waste either of our time, if that makes sense. And then eventually she just picked to not rave. So it's like literally being honest and not being manipulative at all. In the back of my head, I knew it would work. You know what I mean? So it was like she fucking can't stand that, but she knows it's just like she's like, God, it's so effective. And I was like, I mean, but at the same time, it's true. It's just like the thing we were talking about with being open about the psychopathy thing. It's like once you get good at it, you realize you don't even have to do it. Like I can't stand when girls are like, oh, you're just trying to manipulate me. I'm like, no, that's too easy. I'd rather you do it yourself. You know what I mean? Like, and that sounds fucked up, but at a certain point you can't even call it manipulation because it's just like I'm just being honest about who I am and what my intentions are and what I'm gonna get mad about. And yeah, I might be doing it while you're in a heightened love state of like excitement and we're going to hot tubs and vacations and shit. So that's a little strategic. But other than that, it's like, picking the time to tell someone that is like obviously a huge part of it. But yeah, it's just like make them be like, damn. And then they'll weigh it out. They'll be like, well, shit, I could be a stay-at-home mom. He can teach me how to have a platform. He can fucking pay off because I'm like very like, like traditional guy, like, the guy provides and all that. And so they start to wait out like, damn, but I'd rather go to raves or be with someone who's fucking honest and tells me like they don't like that shit. And it's like, like I can't, I'm the same way with girls too, like very possessive. Like I can't protect you if you're gone. And I just don't fucking like the idea of like, just obvious like but that's another thing too, is I don't go out. So again, why would I date someone that does? Like I don't go have guys nights or stay out overnight. So why would I be with someone that does? It doesn't make any sense. It's like a drug addict being with someone who's not a drug addict. You're not going to work.
Oh man, you're preaching to the choir, and it's actually I'll send it through to you in my most recent book. I talked about this moment where, and it was again in the height of love with my now wife, where she was like, I could never date a guy who's got a history with drugs. And my next move
Right.
was to tell her about my extensive history with drugs. And she just decided, okay, well, that's not my standard anymore. Then I changed my mind. And it was amazing to me. I was just like, I eventually developed a kind of framework that I call pushing them away with honesty. And like you, the reason I once I found honesty, I gave up on manipulating. Well, one of the reasons is that it's way more effective. That
It
I
really is.
do
Yeah.
better with honesty than any like thoughtful strategic deception has ever done for me. I'm like, and it's so easy. I don't need to think.
So easy.
I
And
everything.
not doing it and not trying to manipulate versus being honest is almost like taking a painkiller. It's just delaying the inevitable. You know what I mean?
Exactly. But yeah, like I said, I had to manually get to a mindset or a viewpoint that you've kind of got naturally.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because if people are listening to you carefully, if they can get over the serial killer, um, whatever you call it, stereotype, and they
Right.
say like, this is what the viewpoint of someone minus self-doubt looks like. Without that
Yeah.
burden, this is how they see the world, and you can actually adopt that. You can
Yeah.
learn
Anyone.
from
I
it.
think anyone could too. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, man, we could keep going and going, and I may have to have another conversation with you. But we'll start wrapping it up. Obviously, and I'm keen to read your book as well. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your work and how people can get hold of it, that kind of thing?
It'll be out September 1st. And then I'm gonna do it'll be Jack the Ripper. It'll be a modern day remake, and then September 1st that'll be out. And I don't know the exact dates, but within 60 days from that date, the whole trilogy will come out. So it'll be Jack the Ripper, and then there'll be a book called Up the Hill, which is Jill's prequel, and then there'll be a Jack and Jill. So it's kind of like making Jack and Jill story too, but Jack is Jack the Ripper. You know what I mean?
Oh,
And
okay.
Jill is kind of like it just seemed like a cool angle, you know. And then Jill and Up the Hill is kind of like escaping sex trafficking, and so she becomes like that towards men for a different reason, you know. And so they kind of like have a lot of similarities. And Jill is just the name. She just at the end, like at the train station, like what's your name? She has to make a name up off the top of her head. Jill's like the obvious Jack, you know,
Hmm.
Tom, Bill, you know what I mean? And so it's kind of like, oh shit. And like that's when like Jill's born. And so it's also, you know what I mean? Like goes into Jack and Jill too. I was like, that'd be sick. So yeah, it'll be a whole trilogy and it'll be out before Christmas for sure. And then after that, I'm gonna do The Ripper Rising, which I'm not sure when, but it'll be like an extension of the trilogy. But yeah, it'll be available just like on my website or just on all my socials in my bio. I'll just have like links to it and stuff.
Cool. Yeah, yeah, and I'll post those links. And yeah, it'll be a fascinating read. Like you say, I think what some of my favorite books, autobiographies by like gangsters and killers and so
Yeah.
I like to see from their perspective. But even
Yeah.
top athletes and stuff like that. When there's a
Yeah.
Bravo 20 by Andy McNabb, but he's SAS soldier, and he later is featured in The Wisdom of Psychopaths because he's highly psychopathic. And so when you
Oh,
read
I
about this
can't.
guy who was like captured and tortured by jihadis and stuff, and just how casually he talks about getting beaten up every day, and how he thinks it's kind of fun
Yeah.
and
You
stuff.
don't
He's
care.
like,
Yeah.
mostly
That's
he's
bizarre. I
interested
gotta
in
read that.
ammunition.
What's it called?
Bravo 20, the book, Andy
Huh.
McNeil. I don't know, it's a pseudonym, but yeah,
And he wrote it?
he wrote it, and you get to see what it's like to be sort of like one of those top soldiers, special forces, but with very little in terms of remorse, self doubt, anxiety. Just
Right.
very very ruthless dude. And there's an interesting story about him actually, where the author of Wisdom of Psychopaths were hanging out with him in a bar, and some guys got rowdy. And he's not a big guy; he's SAS, but nobody
Right.
knows it. And he just goes up to them and he's just like, "Okay, you guys need to put your drink down and leave, or you're going to see violence like you've never seen it before." And four big guys just walked out because of the look on his face, just the way
Yeah,
he's.
the cold. Yeah, they can feel it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
just realized, holy shit, I'm in the room with a dangerous person. The something about their lizard brain went, okay, this is not worth it.
Yeah. That's
Anyway,
interesting.
so I think it's fascinating. I think what I love is I don't believe, when people say they have a disorder, or they might say that you have antisocial personality disorder or something like that. What I'd say is it's only a disorder if you're not making it work for you. If you're making it work for you, then disorder is just not the right word for it. I know
Yeah,
plenty of
it's
people
not.
who don't have any classifications and they're highly disordered. So what are they, you know? And
Right.
you seem to have made it work for you. Not only have you found it and accepted it, um, but you know,
It's quite convenient, actually.
yeah, well, it seemed, you know, for you to turn it into like horror writing, marketing your own work. I mean, like that's exactly
Seems,
what I'd advise a psychopath to do. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, yeah, because you get your whole fix just off. Even if someone wants to get into like the whole, even if you had like crazy violent tense, well, you can just recreate it through. You know what I mean? It's yeah, it just kind of gives you every fix that you need. You know what I mean? As far as persuasion, marketing. You know what I mean? Uh, Making it work for you, not having no one tell you what to do. It all works perfectly.
yeah, well, I'm stoked to see it. You know, because like I said, I used to work with criminals. I'm like, dude, you could be doing so much more with this power you got. You
Yeah.
know, there's some of them
Yeah.
that figured that out. You know, they figured out like one guy became a prisoner advocate and he used to sue the Department of Corrections, and he was so good in court that he won a lot of the time. He wasn't even a lawyer.
Wow.
And I was just like, you see what you could have done, you know, what you could be.
Yeah.
You didn't have to be
Have
like
you seen?
bank robber, you know?
You're right. Have you seen the movie Blow with Johnny Depp?
Yeah, I think a very long time ago, but yeah.
I had a moment like that when I was younger, and I was telling my mom like, "Oh, I'm good at what I do with whatever it was, like something criminal." And she hit me with one of those. She was like, "You would have been good at anything," and I was like, "It's kind of like a mom thing," but I was like, "Holy shit!" Like that's actually. And I started thinking about it. Like I think I could, but that's where the self doubt. It's like if like I told my girl this, she was trying to like get into her, like trying to find her niche. And I was like, if you can't find one, a podcast is a good way to do it because it's just open to anything. Like what's Joe Rogan's niche? He doesn't have one. He just, his niche is all the niches. And she was like saying, well, yeah, you have your thing. And I was like, but this is a new thing. Like I had a following before, but these are all new people. This started in December. It hasn't even been a year. And so I was telling her like I could do it as a joke. Like you could tell me to do like literally anything, and I would just show you in 60 days that I could get some type of uh you know what I mean, edge in it. You know what I mean? Because it's just like very easy. If you just think you can do it, that's all it is. It's actually interesting too, because I can kind of tell. I don't know. I'm sure you can, but like even talking when you said you have psychopathic traits, I can definitely tell
Mhm.
by like this. We have so many similarities, and I was actually wondering, do you think yours is because they say like nature and nurture. Do you think that some of like your traits came from nurture from talking or from being in around people like that?
Yeah, I'd say I'm heavy on the nurture side. So first was like the Machiavellian manipulation thing. I learned that to fit in at school, and I became like the master of being like the funny cool kid, and that was an act.
Right.
I was like a method actor, and I was able to like witness myself being something that I'm not, and just like a puppet master from behind.
Right.
Like I knew, like I could walk into a room, and I know the kind of humor that would make everyone in that room laugh, and I could read everyone, and looking back now, I'm like that's psycho as fuck. Like it's
Yeah, no,
ridiculous.
it is for sure.
But then when I got to Department of Corrections, and I was around these, really after a while around really dangerous people, and actually the fucking staff, the politics and everything in the staff was as bad in terms of manipulation,
Right.
gameplay. And I was getting trained by really top forensic psychiatrists and psychologists around manipulation and managing it, which actually, of course, taught me the other side of it as well.
Huh.
But then I think when I got to the point when I was managing like really high risk guys who did really dangerous shit, and you had to like make snap decisions that could or could not put lives at risk. I found this thing in me where I was like, everyone else is panicking, and I'm like, this is just a mathematical calculation. I don't get what's,
Right. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
uh,
Huh.
but then, when my daughter was born, I burst into tears. So I'm not like, you know what I mean? Like,
Right. Right.
got it. And I
Yeah,
spent
that's
most of my 20s very anxious. But there are certain things like I don't know what it's like to be offended. I genuinely have no
yeah. See, that's
empathy
definitely a
for that
psychopathic.
emotion. I don't know what that
Yeah.
emotion feels like. I don't miss people when they're not around. Uh,
Yeah, that's one too. Yeah.
I'm very
Out of sight,
brief
out of
with
mind.
grieving.
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind. That's interesting too that you said the thing about walk into a room. A long story short, I had a buddy at work who was kind of like the boss. He'd be like, "Hey, go pick that up." He'd be like, "All right, dude." All right. And he just acted so like sluggish all the time. And then like they were letting me take naps. You know what I mean? Like the boss gave me some of his Vicodin. Like I could call off, and he would mark it that I didn't. He'd punch in for me when I wasn't at work. And they're like, "Bro, me and you are the same exact fucking person. How you just get away with this shit?" And one of the guys that I worked with, he had worked for me at a different place. In my like early 20s, and he was like, dude, he was like that at the last job. And I'm like, do you not get it? Act like you like him. That's all you have to do, bro. If you notice the only difference between me and you is I act the boss's name was Rick. I was like, I engage with him about anything. I'm like, oh no shit, dude, really? Oh wow. And it's just like you're acting like you don't like him. Why would he like you? Name anyone you know that likes you that you don't like. There isn't anybody. No one wants to lose a supporter or a fan or whatever you would want to call it. But I was like, dude, it's not that hard. It's easier to act like you like it. And I couldn't stand the boss, but he bring up anything, fucking 70s rock. I'm like, oh, I fucking like Leonard Skinner. You could find a way, dude. Just make him always make a joke like, hey, what's up, dude? Like, just be giddy towards him, and then he's gonna naturally let you get away with more because he thinks you guys are friends on his terms. You know what I mean? And it just seems like it's the same thing though. It's just like walk in and kind of like almost like chameleon in a way.
Mm. Yeah, I was definitely a chameleon. But yeah, like I said, I'm not all the way there. I've had bouts of depression, I've had chronic anxiety, I've had things that like full blown. Like I think on the metric, the 33 point scale, I score like a 19 or a 20. I'm sort of like
Oh, okay.
not all the way.
Mine
Um,
was 31.
right, that's pretty fucking high, dude. That's
Yeah.
the points off. It's a good thing you chose writing over serial killing because you probably would have been getting
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, but I like this because as I know, as you said, this is all everything you're doing is self-serving, but you are also showing others who feel the same as you out there that like there's a pro-social way and it's actually a better off thing that this is what I've
Yeah,
always suspected. I think this is why I found psychopathy so fascinating, is that with the right guidance, they're actually the heroes, not the villains. Like,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of like TED Talks on that where it's like we just need to make the world around them, make it a level playing field, and then it'll be fine.
yeah. Somebody put it like they're the ones who make the stock market crash, but they're also the ones who'll bring it back again. So it's like
Yeah,
they've
true.
got the power either way. Um,
Yep.
but as you say, the nurture element, the ones who end up gangsters and serial killers, I never found one that didn't have serious abuse in childhood and stuff. Like,
Yeah, I had a little bit, but it was just kind of like not like sexual abuse. It was just like my mom getting drunk and like hitting us around. But again, I'd breeze past it because it's just like I don't even really care about it. It's not that big of a deal.
well, that's what I'm thinking. Like the fact that at that critical point you decided like, fuck prison and that pathway, I'm going to go this other pathway.
Yeah.
Had you been worse in childhood, you might have chosen it differently at that point.
Right. Yeah. No, I believe that for sure. Yeah. Probably. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the guys I work with who are whatever they were, sex traffickers, drug dealers, gangsters, they were on the drugs since they were 7 years old, abused the fuck
Right.
gangs when they were 11. Like the nurture was very strong in a certain direction, a very antisocial direction. So they kind of didn't have much of a chance of choosing the smarter way. There's a really fascinating case. I'll just finish with this. There was these two brothers. I won't name them because they're very high profile in New Zealand, but one was a really famous politician and one was a pretty much New Zealand's only recognized serial killer. I managed and I managed the killer guy and I had to deal with his brother because they were involved and they're both clearly psychopaths.
Right.
Dealing with the brother was like, oh God, you're even worse than the fucking killer dude. Like he's just
Right. Yeah.
smarmy, charming bullshit artist. And there was something different. Like I think they'd been split when they were younger, and one had gone with like an abusive alcoholic family, another had gone with like kind of middle class. And they were
Ah.
both clearly as ruthless and deceptive and so on, but one had gone on to like kill multiple people, and the other had just gone on to like be a really scammy politician.
Wow.
And it's just
That's interesting.
amazing to watch that case study play out like that. I was like, these are the
Yeah.
same guys given different nurtures. And
Yeah, that's what I think it was too. That's crazy because I never even heard of that, but that makes so much sense because that's how it was with my mom. Like I was saying, like by night it was like abusive and just toxic, chasing around with knives, all type of shit, you know. And then by day she was just super supportive and was like, you're my firstborn son, you can do. She was like made me very confident. Like she was like, you got blue eyes, face the sun when you talk to a girl, you're beautiful, do this, do this. Oh, you could do this, or you could do anything. And so I had both in the same house, so it was really weird. So it kind of just, I think that's a huge part of it. Like there was abuse, but it was almost like there was more like support and like just blind confidence. You know what I mean? So it's kind of interesting. It's like what you're talking about, but if it was one person in one house.
yeah, that's really interesting, man. Must have been like on a knife's edge for a while there.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but
Oh yeah.
I'm glad. I'm glad for everybody else, but I'm happy for you that it worked out this way, because
Yeah, no, me too for sure.
you could contribute all sorts of great art and everything to the world, um, instead of digging holes, as you put it.
Exactly. Yeah, no, exactly.
Um, but look, man, and yeah, I really appreciate you sharing with us today, and
Of course.
yeah, and just sort of demonstrating the honesty that I'm always advocating, and showing kind of what it looks like in terms of how somebody kind of naturally confident has also ended up falling on honesty as just being the smartest strategy. And this is kind of
Yeah.
what I'm always trying to promote to people. I'm like, I don't say honest as a moral thing. I'm not actually that much of a moral person. I say it
Yeah,
as
me neither. It's not, again, it's not for it's like the same thing as choosing to do the bad or the wrong thing. It's just like this works the best. It's completely self-serving. It's not genuine for anyone else at all. But if it works for everybody, then it works for everybody. You know what I mean?
yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Yeah, like I said, appreciate you taking the time, and I may have to get you on the horn again because this is just very fascinating for me.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like we could go on and on. It was 2 hours. It didn't even feel like that. Yeah, I'd be
Yeah.
definitely down.
Um, and so yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. I'm going to share your links. I'll get links to everything for you, and make sure people check out your book. And cool, dude. Keep doing what you're doing. Not that you need my encouragement, and I'll see you next time.
You too, man. All right, see you next time.
Are you a nice guy or people pleaser who wishes they were more assertive, more honest, and better respected by others? Since 2013, I've been helping people just like you discover their integrity and apply it courageously to build deep and meaningful connections, get respected by others, and become the confident person you've always wanted to be. Imagine being able to speak your mind without worrying what other people will think or worrying that it's the right thing to say, and being able to assertively stand up for yourself and your loved ones. Imagine never feeling the need to apologize for who you are or what you want, and being able to live carefree without shame or the I'm not good enough story in your head. Imagine going to bed knowing that you courageously took every opportunity available to you and you've got no regrets because you always know what you should be doing in every situation. I'm so confident in my ability to help people like you unleash your highest level of self worth that I give people a free coaching session to test what I'm doing. In this 1 hour session, we will uncover the biggest barrier to your confidence, whether it's an awareness problem, you don't know what you should be doing differently, or it's a courage problem, you know what you should be doing, but you find it too intimidating. I will guide you to make a breakthrough with your behavior to get through that barrier in a powerful way without feeling terrified and without destroying everything you love. I've had some people find this first session so powerful that I never hear from them again simply because they didn't need anything more after that. It launched them into the highest level of confidence that they've ever experienced. And if that's the result you get, I'm good with that. As one client put it, this session was more valuable to me than 3 years of therapy combined. So if you're tired of trying to keep everybody happy, and you're sick of worrying what other people think of you, and you're concerned that your people pleasing and conflict avoidance is going to damage your relationships, then come and have a talk with me. Worst case scenario, you get to experience what it's like to talk with someone who actually understands what it's like to be you. I've lived the nice guy experience for decades. I know it inside and out. I know that pain. Case scenario, and very likely, you will have such a powerful insight into a behavioral change that you can make in the next 24 hours to significantly improve your confidence, relationships, and career. All I ask is that you be honest, open to change, and willing to try something new. Why wait another 10 years to discover confidence when you can do it today? Fill out the brief form below to apply for a trial coaching session. Do this quickly because there are limited spots each month, and then I'll get back to you to book in a time to talk.